Maybe let's start with Heather at the end, do a quick introduction just about yourself before we get going.
That sounds great. Hi everybody, my name is Heather Garen. I am the Chief People Officer at a company called Unquork. I was dismayed to learn it has nothing to do with wine, but it is a very cool tech startup located right here in Manhattan, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today.
Hi everyone, my name is Adasi. I'm originally from the Washington DC metro area, and I work for an amazing company called Greenhouse Software. One of our partners here today, hello. And Greenhouse, if you don't know about Greenhouse, we are the hiring kind of ecosystem of choice. And we work with over 7,500 companies across the globe, helping them to kind of scale their talent as their competitive advantage. And we've gotten to, like many of us here, we've won a couple of awards for our culture. Best place to work for women, for millennials, in tech. I can kind of keep going. And so I'm happy to share some of our learnings from Greenhouse with you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Namita and I am local to New York City. The company I represent is OSF Digital and the Chief People Officer. My company is mostly in Salesforce. We are the implementation partners for Salesforce, present in 25 countries. So that keeps my job really exciting. I follow the sun model, or the moon model, I don't know, whatever it is. So yeah, good to be here and nice to be with you today. Thank you.
Wonderful, and I was speaking with the panelists earlier. Something that we do want to encourage is, if you have a question or a question that comes out from what something is said up here, please don't be shy. We're all really about getting some actionable takeaways from this, so we love specific examples of things that people want to dive a bit more into. So don't be shy as we kind of go through this. But to kick things off, when we talk about the geographical organizational silo element of things, I think a really obvious starting point is the idea of communication and effective communication within that. So my first question that I'd like to pose to you three is in terms of what are the ways that we can cultivate a culture of communication, like the right type of culture, the right type of effective communication within your kind of dispersed workforce. And Heather, I'm going to throw it to you first. I know you mentioned you've kind of growing tech startups. I'm sure you've seen a lot of iterations of this. So I guess what's your take when it comes to that?
So I agree with being intentional. I also have found something incredibly freeing working in a startup, which is to act in the moment. So yes, be intentional about communications, but I love having unfettered access to our all-employee Slack channel, to our all-employee email. And well, as much as I think the rest of the SLT needs to be visible and communicate, don't forget you're a member of the SLT also, and people want to hear from you too. And so for me, it's been incredibly important to see my job as having two pieces. First is all the HR stuff and taking care of my team and the HR, keep the fundamentals. But the other half is to be constantly communicating directly with every single Unquorker. And so I personally still lead our all hands every 2 weeks. I go to orientation. I'll do new employee boot camp because I think it's critical for employees to hear from us as a member of that senior leadership team.
That's an amazing point, and what I've seen is whatever you just said, Heather, that also leads to engagement by default, right? Because what you're building is you're not falling with engagement, because everything you do in an organization is experience via communication. You can set great policies, you can have an amazing onboarding experience, but if you're not communicating it well, it's really, you're missing some last good part of it. As we talked about, I think before pandemic, things that we really talked about was experiences, the journey experiences of not just the customers, but also the employees, right? I think somewhere over the way engagement has taken in a big way over, but I think we're still coming back to that the employee experience is going to be the differentiator. For us, in my organization, we've done communication and engagement in a way that we're crowdsourcing because we're in 25 countries, and I don't even know how many locations, and we're truly remote. So we've taken communication in a way that we did our values last time, but we did it in a crowdsourcing manner. We said, you all can vote for what you think. So we did give option of 20, and we said, you're going to choose what is the, my organization is our acronym changes every 4 years. So we're like, our acronym will change based on what we are today. So that gets crowdsourced, and it was 100% employees led, 100%, right? So today we are, it was once upon a time something, today we are, one step forward. This was during last year that we coined. So what I'm seeing is, it is just making people, because engagement is a term which is, if I ask so many of us in the room, we're going to define engagement and culture very differently, right? So it is about your organization, the uniqueness, and how do you want to tie it back to the colleagues is going to really matter. So we've done it in a way that can communication tee into engagement in a way. So, and it's really making a lot of good waves. I feel surveys are a good way to tell you the mirror, but we just did our last year's engagement survey, and I'm surprised myself. This is my 14th month in the company. It's 83% favorable scores and 98% participation. This is never heard of. Like, I've never heard of this in my career, right? So something is wrong, and this is remote workers. Right? Most of us are like remote. So yeah, something probably is driving this well. So that's something I'd like to share, like crowdsourcing, and it's taking a lot of extra effort on even just the HR department. We don't have to just do the whole 9 hours of let's coin the values and let's do this. But sharing the workload in a way back to their colleagues, and the socialization and the change management is happening way up front, then you're going to do the downstream part of it. So just some things.
And Namita, I'd love to just ask a question off the back of that, because I think that's great proof of the pudding, almost, in the way that you've created this culture of communication by the fact that you're getting such buy-in to your surveys and people are really using the opportunity to do that. I would love to take a theme that we had a minute ago around about getting that kind of wider buy-in. I guess how, in terms of creating that culture, did you do a lot of work in terms of getting that buy-in from the SLT team, in terms of making sure that it was felt everywhere to have that end result of getting such high participation? I guess, did you start with the SLT or did you start with the employee base? I don't know if anything to speak to that.
Sure, that's a great question, and I'm not going to take all the credit saying it just last 14 months I made the whole repos of the organization. There was already there's a communications, not team, but there's one individual who's under my team. And this weekly, I don't call it newsletter because it's not a newsletter, but it's a really good, every Monday, come what may, rain, shine, earthquake, whatever, it has to go out. And there are a lot of things in that Monday communication, and I can show you it's as simple as a SharePoint link, and it has updates from some wins we did in the previous week, what are some employee things happening because we are globally so diverse, what's happening in Brazil, what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening. So we do a lot of touch base with our colleagues on a weekly basis. And on back of that, I proposed this crowdsourcing. I was like, okay, we have to do values. Let's just write on back of that. So we drove it through the weekly comms itself, and we said you can go here, share your links, vote. So everything was driven on the back of it, but I expanded it to the larger big things like values, to economy of the company, to even the. So I use so much of crowdsourcing. Like half of my work, I get it done through our colleagues, and they think that they're part of making the company. So that's what I do.
Wonderful, that's great, thank you. And Jamie, I have to ask the award winner here as well, in terms of your take on this. And particularly when we talk about building the right type of culture, and I think all cultures are by nature good, but making sure we have a good, clear culture from a particular diversity and equity perspective of making sure that it's meeting people where they're at in the right kind of format. Is there any, I guess, specific kind of actionables or anything you've done at Greenhouse that you've seen some great success with?
Yes, I think we've done a lot at Greenhouse. I'm speaking loudly. And when I think about culture in particular, when I got to Greenhouse, I think the inclusion surveys, our inclusion score, I think, was around 77% positive. Right now, it sits about 91% positive. And to your point, we have a lot of folks who are engaging in that inclusion survey. We are about 93% of our population does the surveys. But I think what made us get there is that we set very tangible diversity goals even before I was at Greenhouse. And so we actually have diversity goals that are baked into our overall company-wide OKRs. We talk about values and how important it is to connect everything back to your mission. And so, one of our big drivers this year, as an example, is that we want to turn our people into our competitive advantage. Our talent is our most important thing. It's one of our kind of company-wide goals. We also have specific workforce goals that are around representation, around how we're growing people from different backgrounds, different regions, and on how we're training our people managers, our leaders, and actually all employees, because all of us have taken this, to actually exhibit inclusive behaviors as well towards each other. So there's a lot, I think, from the onboarding program side of things, from when you're getting hired, going through, we're using our own product, or GHR, all the way through when you're getting in as a new employee, to how we retain people, how we promote people, how we move folks through the org, how we do succession planning. All of that has an idea lens, which I haven't seen done as well as other places I've been. I've worked in higher ed, I've worked in nonprofit, behavioral healthcare, but at Greenhouse, I think we are all bought into that as part of a key center of the culture. And so the people that we actually attract to Greenhouse too end up coming, I think, with a similar mentality, wanting to get in, dive in, and help out with our work. So I would say you have to set actual, real goals, strategy. You have to benchmark yourself. Who are the companies we're benchmarking ourselves against? You have to decide what that is for your company. And because we're global, making sure that we're not just taking a US lens and saying copy paste. That's not how that works. It's really opening up and expanding how we're thinking about diversity more globally as well. Those are a few key things we do.
That's wonderful, and I want to take a couple of the things you mentioned at the end there in terms of my next question for you all. Because you talked about a couple of ways in terms of benchmarking, we've already talked about survey results, but in terms of how do we really measure when we talk about engagement in a hybrid work environment, communication, it's a kind of a two-part of this. So how do we measure it? And once you measure it, then amplify it. And Namita, you talked about it a bit because it sounds like you've had some success in amplifying, particularly from a survey result, which is one example of that. But I guess how else are you across 25 countries, I think you mentioned? How are you measuring the success of this, and how do you then amplify it based on that?
So, anything to do with any kind of interventions you do, I feel it's about mindsets first, and deliberation, and then intent all going together. So, whatever we try to, focus on, my idea is, are we first touching the mindsets, right? Because we wanted to drive, our organization is built in a way where let's say if we win a client project in the US, it's going to be serviced by people from 12 to 14 countries, right? So it's a real global delivery model. So how do you make people work together in that manner? It's challenging, and we wanted every month the head of these. So these are units for us. We don't have a country model. We have something called a delivery center, but it's not a country-led model. It's a delivery center model, and we can be anywhere and we can meet anybody. So we wanted the intentional part that the center heads are communicating monthly, about what are the goals in a way that they're pursuing, what are the technologies that they're going to focus on for the next, and several other things. But that wasn't happening because people were like, we're already doing enough and more meetings. This is another meeting added to my calendar. So we were like, okay, let's try to do something. Oh no, people don't engage. I do these meetings, nobody talks. I'm just one way. So then we, latched onto a tool, external tool, where it's a participative tool where you can also have people who are watching can, it's a live survey. You can, say how you're finding this. Did you find the last session good? What do you want to know for the next session? So a lot of it, but that picked up a little bit in terms of participation. And somebody mentioned here, I don't know, he said, I don't know, sorry. He said that, showing back the results. I also feel one of the skills we talked about in one of the slides for HR colleagues, all of us, is program management. Where we spend so much of upstream time trying to coin new interventions, and 80% of the time spent there vis-a-vis program management and governance of what and how the results. It is imperative. We cannot do without it, right? So back to that question. So the next thing we did is, after that, we said, can we templatize this, right? One is people started participating, but so we did monthly unit leaders sections, calling them town halls because people don't like the word town hall. So we just into 5 sections, and 3 of those are pre-populated from a company perspective, what we want people to know. And 2 are bespoke by the units about their, individual. So their time, instead of spending 2 hours trying to make a slide deck and then present, is probably between 15 minutes to 30 minutes now. So we suddenly saw a huge uptake, right? Everybody wants to participate because I think there's an intent sometimes that you don't have time, right? So can we enable? I always feel my role as an enabler. So how can I best enable with tools, but I still try to sometimes apply the mindset before I give tools. So that's my direction.
I think it's great. And I think almost like removing, I think in all parts of life, removing that barrier of entry, right? If it's not easy, people are unlikely to do it unless it's something they've really got their way to. So you want to remove as many of those barriers to participate as possible. And I guess, Heather, from your perspective, I know we talk a lot about geographic kind of allowances and things like that. I know, particularly fast-growing tech startups, some of you being part of it, you often see as like different types of workforces. You have the engineers who tend to be a little bit more siloed away. They like to communicate a little bit differently. You kind of maybe people like sales who won't stop communicating maybe. Like how do you maybe manage some of those different types of challenges?
So let me first share what doesn't work. And I rolled this out and it didn't work. We rolled out the regional connection model, but it was go grab a beer, go grab a burger, throw an axe, or get yourself out of a room or whatever you want to do. Just charge it back to the company. Just go be together in your local regional hubs, work cross-functionally. It didn't increase employee engagement. It didn't increase employee productivity. It might have increased our rate of alcoholism. And so that's what we found absolutely didn't work. So now let me talk just for a moment about what we found did work, which was moving actually beyond our survey results. So how are any of you here in SaaS or tech or startups in addition to me? Okay. So what we know is that growth at all costs is not the model right now. And that actually efficient growth is how our organizations will increase and maintain their value over time. And so when we think about that, what we've noticed is that the economy has actually had an impact on what we're measuring. And so when we talk about measuring engagement, to your point about it can mean a million things to a million different people, every year I would suggest that you identify, like when you say engagement, what are the 3 metrics you're trying to increase? For me, one of those metrics is affinity and connection to our mission. And so when we think about how engagement is defined in this current state, we start to think about productivity as well, and measuring things like revenue per employee, which really also ties into the fact that employees are happier when they feel enabled, when they're more productive, and when they're contributing to a mission and vision that is widely talked about and understood, which is a journey for us. We're not there yet.
Lost my pen. I think a lot of the things that we talk about does go back in terms of like making metrics in so you can track progress, you can understand what progress looks like, and I think it goes back as well, speaking solutions, language, and things like that. So I think that is a real theme we're seeing. I do want to take a moment here in case anyone has any questions or anything that's come out there they'd like to challenge or learn a bit more about before I keep prattling on.
Are there ways
Yeah, please.
Because I'm really curious to know, and I'm sharing this at my table, but last 2 or 3 years, the HR thinking changed a lot to engagement and, a lot around talent development, which once upon a time was a lot talked about, right? And when we say engagement, it was further going down to event management. I'm sorry, through room of all HR colleagues, I can be brutally honest, but I did feel a lot of it was about just trying the happiness question. I understand that's, of course needed, but do you feel that way that, how do you see your organization? That is there a clear demarcation in your goals and objectives when it comes to driving talent, talent initiatives, that just engagement and culture? Is there anything you have to add there? I'm sorry, because it's my question.
Good.
For me, it's always leading with empathy, leading with engagement, hearing your voice out, what they want, what they need, and just really being a resource to your employee life.
I was going to ask to repeat the question. Sorry.
I was asking that you see that the HR goals, like your HR department goals between engagement culture and talent initiatives. Talent means development, talent development, and not just engagement, right? Do you see that as a demarcation? And do you follow initiatives actively around it? Yeah.
So it's interesting because you were talking about the efficient growth for startups, and my organization has been around for over 110 years, but we're going through a business transformation. So right now we're kind of in that startup mindset. So I'm in this unique opportunity where I have that ability to kind of include all those things. However, because we are nonprofit, we have like zero budget, negative budget. So
That's a tough spot to be.
So, that's kind of my challenge actually right now is we are such a lean, small organization, a nonprofit, and we're kind of flat. So how can we have, I want to make sure that development is a part of all of our other initiatives and part of the employee life cycle. But right now it's kind of challenging because we're trying to figure out some other areas, and we're not Google, so even though they're flat, there are all these exciting projects to add people to. So if anyone has any advice or guidance.
I'll share one thing if that's okay. So speaking of Google, have you guys read Laszlo Bock's, it's been around forever, the book Work Rules? If you haven't, definitely go do it. I had the chance to speak with him one-on-one about some of the concepts in the book. And we also have negative budget as a startup, so I can relate. And so as opposed to other places I've worked where talent development was centered on the program, what I found successful and what Laszlo really highlights in the book is personalized experiences. And that in flat organizations where you can't give titles and money and vertical promotions, to provide experiences that employees are looking forward to. And so one of the changes we're making to our goal setting this year is one of the 3 questions will be, what do you want to learn or experience this quarter? Doesn't take money, it's not a conference, it's how can I connect you to other people and other culture carriers and other experiences that will help you feel fulfilled.
That's brilliant.
Stan, I'm sorry, I'm short. It's not helpful. So I would say that for us, I think we try to embed development in our talent initiatives. So there are some things that we're like, okay, we have to do onboarding, we have to do it. But instead of me doing all of the sessions, we're having most of it be run, just recordings and offhand. Really thinking about it as a development opportunity for our junior staff. So can this, associate trader run the session on trading? Or can this account manager who wants to work on their presentation skills, do the session and the deck's already done and there's someone else who's done it before and we can train them, and then that's a coaching opportunity for that other person. So we're trying to figure out different ways to say, okay, we're going to do this thing anyways. How do we get more people involved and frame it as a reward for them? You've been doing so well, with your team and managing as an individual contributor. How would you like to be a manager for our internship program? And it's just a 2-month program, it's a great test run. And now next time when we're thinking about promotions and who could be a manager, that's someone that we have in mind, and they already have a good experience.
Nice, that's awesome.
I love that. Awesome, thank you. That's a good one.
Amazing. No, that was great. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time, but there is one more question I definitely want to ask. And Jamie, I'm going to go to you for this one first. And it's something which, when we talked about earlier, I kind of referenced it a little bit about creating a good culture, the right type of culture, an efficient culture of communication. When you look at, particularly in Greenhouse, how do you go about really creating an inclusive, psychologically safe type of culture? And you can draw from the unique strengths and perspectives of the different groups and individuals within the company. How do you really create that?
It's a good question. One that I'll say, it does take time, so that's number one there. I think you have to assess the company's comfort with talking about things like mental health, well-being, et cetera, psycho safety in the first place, so kind of definition for that. for me, psychological safety is all about that kind of this measure around people's, really, I would say, comfort level, being their full selves, bringing their full selves to work, yes, but also being able to speak up without that fear of retaliation that comes with many cultures, unfortunately. And so I think at Greenhouse, we actually really measure this within our surveys. That's one way you can do it. But it started early on with the qualitative data, the focus groups, the listening tour. When I came in, I literally met with, I think, 60 leaders. Just want to hear from them. But I went around and also met with 60 individual contributors as well, our experts that I call at Greenhouse. You have to, I think, quantitative is very important. It drives a lot of results, but you need to hear what's actually happening on the ground. That's number one. After you get that data though, and what do you do with it? At Greenhouse, we look at it from an individual, regional, team, and department, and global lens, right? So what's happening, for example, around our SF, would be employees. I mean, look different from what our Denver, Dublin, New York, or global leadership employees are experiencing. Actually, a good example of that is I spoke with our head of development, who was based out of Dublin, and she says to me, "Hey, Jamie, is it okay if we're talking about menstrual leave? Because in the UK, it's becoming a bigger thing, menstrual leave." And she's like, "We're not talking about a lot in the US. I'm not sure if you all are, but is that okay?" I'm like, "Yes. This is what the employees are experiencing there. It's already happening, nationwide. Let's make sure that we're part of that conversation too." So being able to localize what you're doing when needed around safety is important, but then giving people the space. So we actually did this whole series called Virtual Realities, where we really brought people together from 2020 to 2022 on topics like, unfortunately, police brutality against African Americans. We talked about anti-API, anti-Asian Islander hate. We talked about productivity, mental health, and just being excited, and what's the other word? Productivity, mental health, and morale in the workplace during the last few years. So actually having facilitated conversations with your employees where they feel like, oh, like I'm not just a number at this job, how I feel, who I am is critical. We give our managers tons of talk tracks, tons of resources. Here's how you have a conversation with an employee who has family in Syria, given what's happening recently. Like really making sure you're being relevant to the current times, but also addressing things as a company and not being quiet about it and communicating about those things pretty regularly. I would say they can probably testify to that back then. So those are a few of the different strategies. The last thing I'll say is lead by example. If you don't feel psychologically safe within yourself, if you're not taking care of your mental health as an HR or people leader, no one's going to trust coming to you. Let's be honest. We're all pretty smart here. The boys we work with are very smart as well. So you have to model for people taking off time when you need it. You have to model people saying, "Hey, I'm having a crappy day because police brutality is getting to me." You have to be that person too. You can't just expect your voice to come to you without taking care of your own self. So that's what I'm also saying.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. I think, it talks again about that in a different sense, the personalized experience, what that individual is experiencing right now, how do you personalize a response to it, and of course, coming from yourself too, as part of it. And Heather, you mentioned about the personalized experience in relation to this, but doing this at scale is difficult, right? Speaking to hundreds of people, I guess, what kind of tools do you use to make sure you can deliver it on that at scale, but on a personal nature?
Yeah, so some are tech-enabled and really scalable, like the donut app in Slack, which I don't totally love, but okay. But some people love it. Some people love it. So there's stuff that's tech-enabled that's really scalable. And then the truth is, sometimes there are just point-in-time programs that may not scale forever, but it's really critical to do right now. And so that looks like having focus groups and small group sessions where you're really talking to employees one-on-one. And can you do that for everybody? No. But particularly around critical employee moments, whether it's societal unrest, whether it's the layoff that you just had and everybody is feeling incredibly unsafe because their best coworkers were just laid off. Sometimes you have to do the stuff that won't scale in the moment, and then you supplement it with the programs that do, which are typically tech-enabled, like the Donut app in Slack. I just got the CEO to agree to every month he's going to meet with a small group of about 10 Unquorkers just to hear directly from them what's on their mind. And that will be a really light lift, and will be free.
Always a key word.
Free.
I feel like we're only just getting going, but somehow we're already overrunning on time here. So I do want to make sure that I don't stand in the way of anyone's lunch as part of this. So if you could join me in giving a massive thank you and an applause for everyone that's speaking here. Thank you for providing such unique and incisive kind of like viewpoints on this and to share with us today for some really actionable takeaways. So massive thank you for that. And I also want to give a massive thank you to our organisers for today, with Achieve and the wonderful event that you put on as well.